how companies across the food chain are working together to drive action on sustainability. We're obviously in a very strange time at the moment, so I'm guessing most of you listening are doing so from home. And that's the case for our panel of experts today. So I thank them all very much for taking the time to join us and share their experiences and insights with us all. So I'd like to welcome Michel Santos from Bunge, Anabella de Freeman from Walmart, and Jill Wheeler from Syngenta, all of whom have extensive experience in sustainability for their respective companies. And the moderator for the session is Dave Stangis, who's the CEO of 21C Impact and was until relatively recently high up in sustainability for Campbell's Soup Company. One final thing from me before I hand over to Dave is to say that you have the ability to ask questions through the webinar platform, and I'd encourage you to do this. I can't promise we'll get to them all, but Dave will reserve some time towards the end of the session to pose some of your questions to the panelists. So without further ado, over to you, Dave. The floor is yours. Thanks.
Thanks, Pete, and welcome to everybody that's calling in on the line. We've got more than a couple hundred people already dialed in, so it's great to have everybody tuned into this topic. And as Pete mentioned, this topic evolves a little bit almost every day as we work our way through COVID-19 as it travels around the world. We've got some great expertise on the line today, and just to kind of give you a high-level overview of how this will flow, I'll ask really just a couple broad questions. I'll let each of the panelists introduce themselves as part of the first question. I'll make sure to try to wrap us up 40 to 45 minutes in so I can take a look at some of the questions that might be coming in through the chat that Pete will help us curate. But again, just to kind of tee us up, as Pete mentioned, my name is Dave Stangis. I spent a little over 11 years at Campbell Soup Company as Chief Sustainability Officer and worked in a range of other efforts around social responsibility as well as social impact, but helped the company set up their responsible sourcing function and manage the sustainable agriculture function. And we really did see a lot of changes in the sector over the last several years with radical transparency coming in and the application of different technologies to take a look at where we could drive efficiency and where we could drive more insights in our food system all the way from the farm right through the retailer and the consumer. So I'm going to start probably with Jill here, and we're all going to try to make our responses, kind of short and to the point, so we make sure that we get the chance for everybody to take a couple bites of this apple. But Jill, could you start with a little introduction, of who you are and your role within Syngenta, and then maybe touch on, same question for all three, some of the emerging tools and technologies that you're seeing or that you're putting in place at Syngenta that help manufacturers and retailers better trace some of the food and ingredients through their supply chain, and maybe ways they're using that information to meet their sustainability goals.
Sure. Thanks, Dave, and good morning, afternoon to everybody. So for those of you who don't know, Syngenta is a global agricultural company, and we develop seed and crop protection products for farmers of all sizes all around the world. There are very few crops we don't touch in some way, whether it's conventional row crops all the way to flowers, vegetables, even turf. And our focus from a sustainability perspective is really helping farmers produce more from less, while at the same time increasingly working to create carbon neutral agriculture. So my role specifically is working with our commercial business in North America to advance the productivity, soil health, biodiversity, and human health and safety commitments that we have made under our Good Growth Plan, which is our global sustainability platform. So from a product perspective and in terms of emerging technologies, we're really focusing our research and development efforts on striving for crop protection products that have the lowest possible residue in crops in the environment. And we're also harnessing our work in plant genetics, not only to improve yields as we always have, but increasingly we're looking at how can we improve nutrition, how can we improve quality, and ultimately that all means how can we reduce waste. So much of our sustainability work is happening there, along with our digital ag solutions, and that is probably where we're seeing a lot of the most exciting technologies come through. We have a farm management software program called LandDB, And we are using that in tandem with farmers and the food chain to help better understand exactly what's happening on the farm. This helps farmers evaluate and continuously improve their sustainability because they are able to monitor everything from profitability to greenhouse gas emissions to nutrient use efficiency and several other metrics. But it also helps them report on that sustainability progress to members of the food chain. And we've probably been doing that for about 10 years now. We were among the first to start that. And as I think most people on this call know, that is only increasing in importance and certainly increasing in scale. So we are constantly evaluating adjacent technologies that can feed into this digital information ecosystem. And some of the exciting ones are satellite imaging. We have a product called Farm Shots, and the big question here is, we know that we need a lot of data to make better decisions, but farmers, like everyone else, are very busy. So what tools can we bring to the forefront to make it fast and easy and not too expensive to capture that data? So certainly satellite imaging is one of those. Remote sensing is another technology that we are exploring, and this could be moisture monitors out in fields that help us better manage irrigation needs, for example. And then above all, how do we feed all of these various data streams into the system? We all know that there are many different systems out there. There are different equipment manufacturers. It can be very challenging to get all of those systems speaking to each other. So a bunch of our work, quite frankly, has been in how do we make these elements talk together? And we recently launched a couple of APIs that are available on mobile devices specifically to do that, because we know that if it's too difficult or too time consuming to input that data, it's probably just not going to happen. So I would say those are some of the exciting things that we are seeing in technology and sustainability.
Thanks, Jill. Just one quick follow-up question just for you that you mentioned it. I think you said it was LandDB. I wanted to make sure we got the name right that everybody could hear. So if they wanted to see it and follow up on it, that's the first one.
That is correct, yes. Capital LAND.DB.
Got it. And then I'm curious, coming from a food manufacturer, have you been able to make some of those data points, insights, levels of intelligence available to your customers as well? I know it's helping you and it's helping your growers, but is it something that you believe the customers could tap into?
I think the biggest value that we have seen from that so far is just a better overall understanding of the dynamics of production, and especially in commodity crops. There used to be a pretty big disconnect between the supply chains within the food chain and production happening on the farm. So I think probably the biggest benefit of the data is the conversations that it unleashes and the higher level of understanding. And now that might change in the future, certainly, but at least the past 10 years, that's what we have seen primarily.
Great. Thanks, Jill. How about I turn to you, Michel? And again, same kind of broad question, a bit of intro on you and your role within Bunge, and then how are you and your company looking at some of these emerging technologies and transparency and sustainability coming together across your business?
Hi, good. Well, thanks for the invite and for having me here today. Greetings, everyone. So I'm Michel Santos. I work for Bunge for over 20 years now. Personally, I'm an agronomist, and I've been dealing with the sustainability arena for over 15 years. And today, as a director for global sustainability here in New York area. As you may know, Bunge is a global company, agribusiness related, food production chain. We have over 200 years in the market, and we are operating in 40 different countries. When we talk about all these solutions and the market trends and what the customers are asking, this is so close to what we are doing today in terms of sustainability. The customers are talking about, traceability and how we could supply them the right information. So for being fully integrated, we are able and capable to provide them the information and make the right connections. Just like our colleague from Syngenta was talking about, the multitude of tools that are out there. So many things to help farmers to grow better, and how to connect this with the customer need. So today, we have a very strong platform in terms of sustainability inside of the company. We call it a kind of a three goals platform for action on climate, responsible supply chains, and accountability. In terms of the demands that we are receiving from the customers, it's interesting. It's all about climate today. So they have multiple concerns and they want to know exactly what is the problem or what is the solution that the agricultural sector could bring for the food-related business. So it's about transparency. So we have to show progress in our commitments, and we have to have clear commitments so our customers could be comfortable with the solutions that we are talking about. Many of these things are pre-competitive, and some other things could be tailor-made, some differentials that we could provide. We are very proud to be identifying, all the issues that we could have and being able to deliver on the commitments from our customers. Most of the things when you talk about climate-related issues for the global agriculture is coming into deforestation. So as a major player in agricultural scenario for the world, we have ourselves our policy, which is to be deforestation free by 2025, and we are working on that for the last 5 years. So with a very interesting monitoring system, we are now able to understand what is exactly happening in our value chain. So although we could identify some areas where deforestation could be material, and we are now able to provide the right input for these farmers to grow in a more sustainable way, we are also able to connect with the customer needs. So we are using satellite imagery to monitor our direct sourcing and also to engage our indirect sourcing. Once we have the information from the farm, so we can monitor and we can check if there is any kind of land use change and effectively what is happening in there. What most of the people do not know is that when we talk about deforestation, we are also talking about forested areas inside of a farm. So if in one hand, customers want to know about, what is the transparency that your company could propose to fight deforestation and to help growers, it's really important to let these customers also know that most of these farmers are conserving land, they are conserving forest inside of their farms, and they are just using the best practices. So I think it's really important for us as a sector to show not only how we are able to fight any issue, but how we could really promote a little bit better what is happening in terms of agriculture. If we believe that the customers and the consumers want to know exactly what is happening out there, and this is about transparency. So we also have to put together this data. So we do have some platforms as well. And again, it's all about engaging the whole value chain. We've been able to engage farmers. We've been able to engage others that are investing in land to help them to solve the issues. So recently we released a new platform named AgroIdeal, which was built upon the partnership and coalition with a multitude of NGOs, peers, competitors, research institutes down in Brazil and in Argentina. And now we are able to show how much of available land is out there by overlapping a multitude of maps. So we have not only social aspects, but also environmental aspects being monitored, and we can show where soybean, for instance, could be growing in a more sustainable way. We believe that all these demands from customers are coming into accountability. So that's the reason why it's really important for all the industry to be participating in platforms that could disclose better, not only carbon emissions that you may have in your value chain, your scope 3, but also how you are making to make certain that all the value chain is really engaged. So we are reporting on that. We have these CDP questionnaires, which are really interesting, so you can understand what is happening down there, and also engage in the whole logistic platform. So, for instance, we have released an app for truck drivers down in Brazil. The name is Vector. So we can not only track, everything about the logistics, but also this will be supportive for our customers to understand the carbon footprint in the logistics as well. Not to mention, blockchain in the Covantis platform. So we are just putting together and streamlining all the processes that execution could have for the global trade. So when we think about a company our size and the multitude of different customers that we are dealing with, we may not only need to go deep into the farm level and provide farmers the best tools for them to analyze, grow better, and have also the right information to grow sustainably, but also to make certain that this communication could flow in a very easy way throughout the value chain. And we've been able to do this and deliver this to our customers as well.
Thanks, Michel. Listening to some of the things that you're talking about, actually both you and Jill, it connects a lot of dots. I have a lot of conversations today with investors and analysts and even companies, publicly traded companies that are focused on, as you described, disclosure, whether it's TCFD, new climate disclosure, investors trying to get a better picture of risks in the supply chain. And both of what you described are new ways to unlock some of the opportunity for publicly traded companies on the food production side to actually describe some of that. So it's interesting. It's a nice transition as well to Anabella, who is in that space on the retailer side. And Anabella, welcome. And, same question. Again, it's going to be a different lens, but your role, kind of what you're focused on today, but where you're seeing emerging tools and technologies to help. It doesn't have to be traceability per se, but where you're seeing it drive traceability and maybe unlock some other opportunities for sustainability.
Thank you, Dave. I'm very excited to be here, and you'll hear as I share a little bit also that there's common denominators with Jill and Michel as well. I've been with Walmart for over 20 years, in which I've held different roles, including leading the Small Supplier Development Program for Walmart Central America, supported the Women Economic Empowerment Initiative for our LATAM markets, and most recently in the U.S. in responsible sourcing, and currently I lead Walmart's sustainability efforts for the company's fresh produce business focused on reducing environmental impacts and costs throughout the supply chain and driving responsible labor practices. Let me start by sharing our 3 aspirational sustainability goals: to create zero waste, to operate with 100% renewable energy, and sell products that sustain our resources and the environment. I'll focus on the third goal to give you 3 examples of tools and technologies that help us work toward our goals. The first example is we're focused on reducing emissions in our operations. We have set science-based target to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 18% by 2020 through multiple initiatives. Because most emissions in the retail sector lie in product supply chains rather than in stores and distribution centers, we have committed to pursue substantial emission reduction, not only in our own operations, but also across product supply chains. We work with the World Wildlife Fund on the overall concept and design, as well as the Environmental Defense Fund, Conservation International, the Nature Conservancy, the Sustainable Packaging Coalition, and CDP to connect suppliers to measurement methodologies, guidance, and practical tools to help them reduce emissions, resulting in what we call Project Gigaton. Project Gigaton is a global effort that invites suppliers to join us in a commitment to avoid 1 billion metric tons of emissions in our collective value chains by 2030. Through Project Gigaton, suppliers can take their sustainability efforts to the next level through goal setting, calculate emission reductions, avoided or sequestered, self-report, and get credit from Walmart for the progress they make. To date, more than 2,000 suppliers have formally signed on the project, but if among the participants of today's webinar, there are companies that do not supply to us, CDP Climate Change Questionnaire is a good tool to use to monitor your climate actions towards the climate as well. The second example is we also strive to improve transparency and traceability of the products we carry through technologies such as blockchain, similar to what Michel was talking about. For example, Walmart China, working with IBM and Jinlu Meat Company, completed a proof of concept pilot that dramatically reduced the time needed to trace select pork products back to the farm using blockchain. In Walmart US, we have asked our existing suppliers of leafy greens, romaine, and others to use blockchain technology to trace their products back to the farms where they originated. This enhanced transparency can result in greater accountability, improved safety, and more sustainable practices. And lastly, a third example is Walmart engages in advocacy and coalitions to promote environmental public policies that align with our shared value business objectives. An example of this is Global Forest Watch Pro. To promote transparency and traceability across our supply chains in 2017, Walmart joined the World Resource Institute and 20 other companies to launch Global Forest Watch Pro, an online platform that provides companies, banks, and other stakeholders with data and tools for monitoring global forest loss because of the production of key commodities such as palm oil, soy, and Brazilian beef.
Thanks, Anabella. Really good stuff. And the thing that truly comes through from the Walmart perspective is the partnerships and just the global extent of those partnerships. I'm going to basically circle back around on the second broad topic. We're going to kind of leave the technology piece, although it's related. And again, I'll start with you, Anabella, and kind of reverse the chain. And maybe this one's, this is focused on the concept of regenerative and net positive, and where you're seeing that either within your own walls and your own work that you're doing, and it touched on a little bit in each of those. Each of you mentioned it in one way or the other, but where you're seeing that, and maybe where you're seeing those challenges, that regenerative work, that net positive work coming to bear on products that are moving through the value chain, or maybe on a specific solution like food waste, or even where you might be factoring in farmer livelihood. One of the early questions we got in that we'll circle back to if we don't touch on it is, making sure that the farmers and the growers get their fair share of this economic pie. So why don't I start with you, Anabella, and just, broadly, where are you seeing this concept of regenerative showing up, positive impact, net positive in your work?
Well, we have many fronts, but I'll touch on two. One is Walmart sustainable packaging is a concept that we embrace of a circular economy, which moves away from that take, make, dispose approach to one that values the reuse and regeneration of materials and energy, which is why we have extended our zero waste aspiration beyond our own operations to include our whole supply chain and setting a new aspiration of zero plastic waste. To work towards this aspiration, we will work with suppliers, customers, and communities to accelerate the adoption of circular packaging and products. One way we're working on circularity is through packaging design. The Sustainable Packaging Coalition and the Association of Plastic Recyclers provided expert input to develop the Sustainable Packaging Playbook. This playbook provides an overview of sustainable packaging best practices for suppliers interested in improving and innovating packaging. While we focus in on consumer-facing packaging, practices may impact or also be applied across the entire packaging system. This playbook is not meant to replace business requirements. Rather, sustainable packaging best practices may be used to complement business needs and is an open source. So anybody, suppliers or not, can access the sustainability packaging playbook. While plastic may provide numerous benefits relative to other materials, like low cost, shelf life, portability, flexibility, etc., society's ability to collect and recycle plastic waste has failed to keep up with exponential increases in plastic production. As noted by the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, only less than 14% of plastic packaging is recycled globally. And this low number is likely driven by a combination of consumer confusion about where or how to recycle, weak collection infrastructure, and broken links between plastic design and scalable processing infrastructure. So to encourage customers to recycle, we have asked suppliers to put more consumer-friendly recycling information on packaging. And in the US and Canada, Walmart encourages the use of the Sustainable Packaging Coalition's How to Recycle label and has committed to work with private brand suppliers to label 100% of our food and consumable private brand packaging with the How to Recycle label by 2022 in the US and by 2025 in Canada. And for food waste, we are inspired by the U.S. Sustainable Development Goal to have per capita global food waste at the retailer and consumer level to reduce food losses along production and supply chains by 2030. We are signatory to the Consumer Goods Forum's Food Waste Resolution. And in the spirit of time and when food goes unpurchased, Walmart works to maximize its use by getting it to people and places that need it. In addition to donating food to food banks and other charities, Walmart and the Walmart Foundation have donated funds to purchase equipment to increase the capacity of the charitable meal system to transport and deliver fresh food. If food is no longer edible, we try to convert it into animal feed, compost, or energy. And also to help out the consumer, we undertake efforts, and over 92% of our private brands products in the US already are using best if used by date labels, so that we consumers can understand and best use the food and reduce the food loss and waste.
Great, thanks, Anabella. The food waste topic is really an interesting one, and there's a few questions around more information and access to tools. The Consumer Goods Forum that Anabella mentioned has a commitment that both retailers and producers have committed to, and they've compiled some examples and case studies out on their website, and you can take a look at those if you're interested to learn a little bit more. Companies like Spoiler Alert and Lean Path and others are trying to build systems in place inside the food value chain to help identify some of these opportunities. But some of the company examples that you'll see if you go take a look at the Consumer Goods Forum will give you a lot of great ideas of where there's opportunity, but also where some of these challenges are being addressed. Michel, coming to you on this concept of regenerative, net positive, how is it playing out in your world?
Yeah, and this is so interesting because this again has to do with traceability and transparency in our value chain. So we believe that there is no way for you to consider that one size fits all in this scenario. You do have to understand the local situation. You do have to dig into your supply chain and understand exactly what is the impact that is out there and how you could support. So for you to have an idea, today we are monitoring over 14 million hectares of farmland in South America. That's around 30 million acres of farmland. It's a tremendously large amount of land being monitored to understand exactly what is the real impact in these lands. If we consider, the palm oil industry, we are mapping and monitoring 4 million hectares and monitoring 27 million hectares to see if there is afforestation in place for palm. And what is the regenerative approach in all of these things? Once we understand and we collect the data and we can really engage with these farmers, we can really have several projects that would be promoting the right impact in these areas. So I was mentioning about the AgroIdeal platform, so we can really show where the areas that will be more suitable for the sustainable expansion of agriculture in South America would be like. So you have to provide information. The other thing is collect the right data and address this impact. So in North America, we are participants of two very interesting platforms. One of ourselves with the center field. So we are collecting data from these farmers. We are understanding, the real footprint and impact that they could ever have in the environment. And we are helping them to manage these impacts. And by collecting these impacts and collecting this information, we can also provide more data for our customers. So we have some customers engaged, so they are fully connected with these farms through the center field. We are also partners in field to market. So this helps farmers to benchmark how they are producing and how the others, keeping all the confidentiality of the information, but how the others are producing in the same landscape. So these are different platforms and a lot of technology, and you have to translate this into a very easy way for the farmers to understand and apply on a daily basis. This should not be a burden. So collecting this information, analyzing this information, and driving, making the difference with the findings that we may have. So this brings all the discussion to the next phase. So how is the whole value chain able to connect and support and provide the right incentives for those farmers that are in the beginning of this value chain? So we believe that we have to create and support farmers and engage the whole value chain to drive the difference. So the findings could be addressed in various ways. Not only for a product specific for our customers, so they would be able to label this difference, they would be able to have traceability of multiple and several indicators, but also they would be able to differentiate themselves. We believe that not only the systems that we have are helping these suppliers and also mainly the customers, just like the ACE Track, which is a platform that we have internally that could go and bring information from the farm level in some areas, but also the certifications that are in place. So Bunge really believes that once the market goes into the certification mold for those standards that are really beyond the legislation and beyond the expectation, this is a way for you to provide the right incentives. So we are not only ready to certify, but we are using several different certifications in our value chain. This has been very helpful because when you think about agriculture, you could go from fiber to biofuel. So today, for you to have an idea, we are most likely one of the largest players in biofuel. And also a very strong player in certification for food as well. And why is it happening? Because we believe that it's possible when you have a clear framework to engage farmers and provide the right incentive and value for the farmer production. We can also increase the production in the farmland and support these growers to do it better, as long as we have the engagement from the whole value chain. So naturally, we have our goals. Naturally, we have our partnerships with the major players in the market. But what we really want is to have this kind of accountability approach. So all of the value chain could have their share responsibility exercised. So the farmers would understand the real importance, not only because it's just producing higher yields and better crops, but because there is the other end of the value chain, bringing the real value that would help the farmers to thrive. I think this is the most important in terms of regenerative approach. Naturally, when we talk about our own operations, we have our waste management. Even for the products and countries where we are dealing with consumers, we do have recycling. So one very interesting program that we are engaged with is the soya recycler program down in Brazil. So we are helping the households to collect back the edible oil, use it in their kitchen so we can produce soap, which is really important for the situation that we are living today, and also biofuel. So there is no waste. We believe that the food industry would be sustainable once we have a complete cycle, virtuous cycle with no waste at all. People are concerned and understanding their role. Each of the parts of the value chain has its role, from the farmer to the middleman, which in this case it's us, from the other companies that are related to consumers. We are working together, and we believe that it's a path, and it's good to have all these challenges because this is what pushes us going forward.
Yeah, thanks, Michel. A lot of interest on the line in food waste and on this topic of regenerative as well. Just one quick follow-up question for you, Michel. You mentioned at the beginning of your kind of this session of the millions of hectares that you have that you're able to monitor. Do you have a sense of, is that some percentage of the total hectares under management that you guys have, or is monitoring a subset? Are you talking about all of them? What percentage of those hectares that you actually can monitor are of the overall total that you guys control?
Yeah, and this is a very good question. So to make certain that we are all on the same page, we are not producing crops. Okay, so we buy these crops from these farmers, we buy these crops from others. So what we are monitoring is exactly where some issue, a major issue, could be in place. So today, the major issue that one could think about agriculture is the relation with agriculture and deforestation. This is what the investors want to know. This is what the other stakeholders want to know, and this is where we are addressing this more closely. So we have identified the areas that could have some kind of relationship with deforestation in Southeast Asia and in South America. So today, I can tell you that we are monitoring almost 100% of the areas that could be somehow related to deforestation. And that's when I come to these 14 million hectares of farmland being monitored in South America. That comprises over 90% of our direct sourcing. So it's a lot of land. And for Southeast Asia, I'm talking about monitoring 27 million hectares as well. So we are monitoring where this effect of deforestation could be in place. Observe that monitoring in these terms is satellite monitoring, mapping these farms and checking for land use change. Naturally, I'm talking also about other projects that we have in North America and other places that we are engaging farmers with a multitude of tools, to help them not only in North America, but also in South America to have the best indicators for sustainability.
Got it. Thank you very much. I've seen just even today on this topic of regenerative, a new product launch by Nature's Path, which are putting regenerative labels in addition to organic labels. And Jill, I just wanted to give you a chance to address this topic too, and how you might be seeing it in Syngenta's world. Is this a topic that I think you mentioned early on in the conversation, net positive or net zero ag, and how is this showing up in your supply chain?
Yes, it definitely is, and that's a great question. What we're seeing with regenerative is a lot of conversations and no single definition. And I appreciate Michel talking about no one size fits all when it comes to sustainability, and that's exactly the case with regenerative agriculture as well. It depends who you talk to. But one of the few consistencies we do see in these discussions is a real focus on improving soil health And I would say that farmers are very interested in this topic, but there's a big knowledge gap right now, especially a gap in terms of what's the return on investment picture for when you are doing things to improve soil health, such as cover crops or switching to complete no-till. And unfortunately, talking about today, we're in a situation where these economics are even more important than they have ever been. And shout out to whoever in the audience asked the question about how do farmers get their fair share. I mean, it's a critical question right now because there simply is no room for risk. Let's take Midwestern row crops and corn just as one example. We know that about 40% of corn today goes to the ethanol market. Well, the bottom is falling out of that as we speak. And another 40% roughly goes to feeding livestock. Well, we have seen the challenges with livestock in terms of what's happening with COVID-19 at packing plants. So whereas this was a challenge before from an economic perspective, it is even more of a challenge and more of a risk now to attempt any of these quote unquote regenerative practices if you're not sure what that's going to be doing to your bottom line. Currently, the market is simply not rewarding these behaviors as much as we would typically expect to see it in a standard system of capitalism, right? So we think that there certainly would be a lot of interest in farmers, and we hear this from farmers, a lot of interest in these practices, but they just can't afford to do all of that without any shared value from the rest of the food chain. And part of our challenge, of course, is that especially when we're talking about our commodity products, undifferentiated corn, soybean, et cetera, our markets and our infrastructure was never set up for a lot of distinction and a lot of identity preservation on these products. Now, that just is the way that it is. We probably would see more incentives for traceability, data sharing, and adoption of specific practices, such as specific regenerative practices, if that supply chain were a little shorter and there was more connection between the producer and the end user. But right now, that's just not how the system is set up. The one area where at Syngenta we do see some opportunity is the concept of a functioning carbon or ecosystem services market. So we have been involved with the Ecosystem Services Market Consortium. We are looking at how do we create that voluntary market. And as you might imagine, it's technically very complex, especially when you start talking about carbon sequestration and soil health, improving soil organic matter levels, such as many people are discussing in the whole regenerative agriculture conversation. It's very difficult to track that and to measure that consistently in a cost-effective way, a cost-effective and relatively quick way. So whereas it would be a wonderful thing to be able to have that as an additional revenue stream and an additional opportunity to share the value of these regenerative practices with farmers, it's complicated. And the other thing that makes it so complicated is farming is a complex biological system, and every year is a little bit different. So it's very hard to come up with these consistent models and very predictable systems when every year can look a lot differently. And then the other thing that we've been talking about food waste, and I'm glad that this came up because it is such a significant topic, but it too is very complicated. So from a Syngenta standpoint, we've been doing a lot with our breeding programs. I can give one example. We have a watermelon called Crisp Delight, and we intentionally bred that watermelon so that, as the name might indicate, it stays crisper longer, which means that there is more shelf life. There's more opportunity for that retailer to find a buyer, so it doesn't have to be thrown out. But part of our challenge too, and part of the complexity, is that we as a society, we're kind of spoiled because we expect to see perfect produce all the time, and nature just doesn't work that way. So there's a lot of perfectly good product that is thrown out simply because it doesn't meet what are essentially aesthetic standards. Now, we could be entering a time with COVID-19 where people are looking at the whole food waste issue a little differently. Maybe if it's such a challenge to get to the grocery store, you're going to eat that apple that's starting to look a little brown. Who knows? Only time will tell. But it is certainly one of the challenges in the food waste situation. And frankly, we're seeing another element of that too, which is labor. Many of the crops that we eat are heavily labor intensive, and Anabella can back me up here, especially when you start looking at produce. And any hitches in that labor system is going to create issues where, we've already seen it. If those markets dry up, such as with restaurants and institutions, and we don't have the labor and the infrastructure to get that food where it needs to go, we're looking at a lot of waste. So whereas we at Syngenta are doing everything we can to make sure that farmers have the most marketable product that they can from our technologies, there is only so much we can do because all of these systems, of course, are incredibly complicated.
Yeah, it's a lot of key points in that quick response, Jill. That I'm sure, I've been having a lot of conversations, and I'm sure you guys have as well, and probably not just the panelists, but the interested stakeholders on the team. The social and kind of the social drivers that are driving some of this effort, the relationship with COVID-19. There's a bunch of questions that have come in. I've tried to incorporate some of those in the dialogue so far, but one question that came in and one of the conversations that I had with another set of stakeholders last week was trying to connect dots with, not players that aren't normally connected, food service, ag, nonprofit producers, because we're all frustrated with what we're seeing happen to the food supply under COVID, where, on one news story during the day, we'll see, people lined up for miles trying to get food. And, 10 minutes later in the same newscast, there's farmers on the other side of the country or just down the road dumping, 4,000 gallons of milk down the drain or plowing over their crops because there's been a disconnect, not in the amount of food we're making yet, but the distribution system between food service and retail. And I'm just, one of the questions came in on this point as well is, are there things that you are seeing? Are there short-term actions that any of you? I'll kind of open it up. You can have to speak over one another maybe, but let me know which one wants to answer it. Short-term actions you're seeing within your company that are trying to take on some of these challenges, not obviously solving any of them, but are there any short-term things that you're seeing happen, or your day's jobs have changed other than working remote? That's a direct result of COVID and trying to solve some of these challenges.
I'll take some of it. This is Anabella.
Thanks,
In
Anabella.
food waste, we work very closely for product that is in our stores and it went unpurchased. So we donate a lot to food banks and other charities. And one of the things that we started some while ago was open that those groups, charitable groups, they don't necessarily have to go through the food bank, but they can access our system directly so that they can get served faster. And we've seen that there's that we have been able to support feeding people in that get serviced by the food banks or other charities in a faster way lately due to the crisis. And you may be familiar with a picture that was going around that the food banks were receiving even more people than some of the retailers because of the need at these times. So we have been blessed to be able to be that channel of communication between distribution centers, even some of our suppliers that have excess food to go to charity.
Yeah, I've seen some of the actions that Walmart has taken, and I know firsthand what some of the work that Campbell and other, kind of consumer products companies have been doing, deploying resources, moving up products, tapping into faster turn production and ingredient models to get, products on the shelf. I still know other parts of the food supply that haven't been able to find distribution channels to get product to market or to food banks. Jill or Michel, anything to offer on that topic?
Yeah, this isn't really food, but as I mentioned earlier, we have a flowers group, and we've actually been busy with a campaign to take unused flowers, of course, as restaurants close down and any number of other institutions, part of that market changed. When we have been working with vendors and suppliers to get those flowers into the hands of healthcare workers or nursing homes, or basically from a mental health perspective, anyone who could just use a little bit of hope and a little brightening of their day. So that is one thing that we have been working on.
Yeah. Sure. Which is really interesting is because the supply chain that we are connected is much more related to the large crops. So what we see today is that the growers, they are engaged and they are working as hard as they can to make certain that the whole value chain is being supplied. So we see no disruption in the supply. They are working as hard as they could. Actually, in many cases and in many markets, considering the global trade, the prices are even heated. So it's been quite challenging to make certain that the logistics is in place, but we are there, and all the sector is also engaged into this. The major thing in the current situation about COVID-19 is that there should be no disruption in the supply of the goods that we are talking about, which is the global commodities. Naturally, other things could be in place like droughts and some other issues that we have to face on an annual basis. But the production in the plants and everything is just on time. So in these terms, connected to the large commodities market, there is no disruption at all. And working from home naturally brings up some challenges for all of us. And in extra precaution in our plants and also for the whole industry. But I would say that the population could be safe, that there would be no disruption in this major supply.
Okay. We're getting close to the top of the hour. I've got a couple more questions that we're not going to be able to get through, but I'm going to try to group them together maybe for one final round of these are going to have to be kind of quick hit answers, guys. Sorry to do this to you, but I wonder if we could each maybe close. I'll let you each make a closing statement about things that we can either do, and maybe these are not your things you're doing day to day, but how do you think each of you play a really unique role in the food value system? And what are we doing today, or what could we be doing more of to kind of nudge in a constructive way or move our system further along, and bringing in the thoughts like, how can we help consumers make more sustainable choices? Whether you've touched on a few of these things, maybe they're not striving for the best produce 12 months out of the year, right? Or maybe, how do we help and partner with some of our suppliers? And, that might be like, how do suppliers get to be Walmart suppliers, right? And learn from the systems you guys have in place. I just close. I'll go back around. I'll start with you, Jill, go to Michel, then you, Anabella. But, a thought, maybe a closing thought on how we can help either suppliers, consumers, or the food system itself be even more sustainable or learn from the situation we're in right now with COVID.
Yeah, thanks, Dave. I would say if there's one thing that I could see, it would be that we all realize that we are all in this together, and it is very much a unified system. The food chain is a chain, and everybody is in it together. So let's look at how can we share the value? How can we share what it is that we really want? I talk to so many farmers, and they're more than happy to grow whatever the market demands if they can make money doing it. So maybe it's time for people to be number one, to realize that there are limitations. As we talked about, this is a natural system with limitations and complexity, but there's an opportunity to work together more closely on designing that food system of the future that we want and making sure that we set it up so that it is still profitable for farmers. So that would be the one thing that I would ask for.
All right. Thanks, Jill. Michel, how do you think we can drive some change, whether within your own company or within the whole system?
Yeah, we have internally what we call the Ethos for Sustainability, which is our ACE platform. So it's the following thing: act, make certain that you are being clear about your demands, make certain that you are playing your role, and do whatever you can to make the change. So this is really important. Act. Secondly, conserve. Okay, you are not the only one asking for things. We have limited natural resources. So how can you really make certain that you can produce more, respecting the needs of the earth and also the needs that you may have on consumption? And finally, engage. You are not alone in this world, especially in times like this. So it's not only about acting and conserving, but you have to make certain that the whole value chain is engaged and we are delivering the right message. Just give the right signals. Ask what ask whatever you need, but make certain that the right incentives are in place for the others in the value chain to also engage. So engagement is really crucial in this moment beyond everything that we could do. We all have our own role, but let's make certain that we are all together.
Thanks, that's great. Anabella?
As they said, we're in this together. And you said at the beginning, Dave, how important partnerships are and working not just internally, but reaching out to the NGOs, to the industry, to suppliers, to competitors. Anyways, sustainability are probably the climate has seen a brief, an unfortunate, the circumstances, but a brief right now. But at the same time, let's reevaluate our goals. What are we all doing? Really is a time for transparency, and our customers, they're all wanting to trust the companies more, to trust the information. So all these transparency tools that we touch on today, to really look into it, the more that we track and the more then we can improve the most. And we don't necessarily need to invent the wheel in our own companies, but reach out to other initiatives that are already happening, get involved, and work together so that we can all accomplish our sustainability goals in a better way. And very importantly, the partnership and collaboration among all of us.
Great. Thanks, Anabella. I think, you said the word trust. It came late in the conversation, but that's really what the food system, transacts on. That's what we are ultimately judged on as players in the food system. I want to thank you all. It's been great. And I also think, as you mentioned as well, it's a great time to reflect on how we want to come out of the current situation and what we can learn from it as companies and as individuals. So I'm going to thank you all quickly, but I'm going to turn it over to Pete. I promised I'd give him back 3 minutes, and I think I've got 3 minutes, and I want to make sure everybody gets to their next meeting if they have one. So it's yours, Pete.
Thank you very much, Dave. Some very interesting dialogue and great insights from each of the panelists. Special mention and thanks to you, Dave, for expertly shepherding the discussion. Just to everyone still on the line, we will share the recordings with all tomorrow or Monday latest. And of course, to everyone on the line and everyone listening, please stay home, stay safe, and we'll get through this together. So thanks very much to everyone.
Thanks all.